So I will now start off with a little introduction of what we're going to do today. We now move into the big event, the draft annual plan for consultation. Today we will consider the proposed draft plan and how we manage ratepayers' money and assets for the next 12 months. I think we can all see this drafted against a tough backdrop. Since we were sworn in, we've been briefed in detail on the choppy waters that we're heading into. Inflation, insurance, interest rates have shot up. The labour market's tightened, supply chains have been a headache, and the Reserve Bank is forecasting a recession for later on in the year. In times like this, we must do our bit to take the pressure off people's cost of living. This draft plan started with a projected increase of 14.6% based on the initial budget set in the 2021 long-term plan. Since October, we have been working to get this number down by going through the budget line by line. We have suggested changes to reduce the burden on households while still maintaining the services that our community continue to want. This has led to a draft annual plan with a proposed increase of 5.6% for the 23-24 financial year. I want to thank everyone for their hard work over Christmas break to get us to this figure. In the middle of 2022, it looked like a 3 or 4% would be possible, but we're now seeing inflation over 7%, and in the construction sector, it's sitting around 15%. This has put a huge pressure on households, businesses, councils across the country. A recent survey found that 42% of councils are planning for rates increases of 10% or higher, and another 28% for planning increases between 5 and 10%, meaning that our increase will be among the lowest in New Zealand. I know we're all committed to doing what we can do to keep rates increases as low as possible for as long as possible. Today we decide what we want to suggest to our customers, our community. A big part of that is listening to what people have to say. This is their money, so we need them to give us a steer on how to go forward. After consultation, the public feedback will help us refine and agree the final annual plan for 23-24 by the end of June this year. So let's get proceedings underway. Dawn, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor. And this is probably just to reinforce some of the points that the Mayor has made. And for our new members, welcome to the process of the annual plan. It can sometimes be seen as a dark art, but I hope you find today both enjoyable and actually we get to some conclusions. So every 3 years we prepare a long-term plan, and our last long-term plan covered the period from 2021 to 2031. In the years between the LTP, we have to develop an annual plan, and we do that every year. And the purpose of that is to be transparent about the actual changes in the year coming. And we know, each and every one of us, that the world has changed quite considerably since 2021. The Mayor has mentioned interest rates, inflation, supply issues, a tight labour market, and of course, the geopolitical instability that we've seen worldwide. Those global issues have had a bigger than usual impact on New Zealand and on our local economy, and have put the City Council also under pressure. These are concrete facts that every organisation, family and community is facing in New Zealand today, and we know that that is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Staff and councillors have worked incredibly hard together to keep the proposed rates figure below the 7% inflation rate that we're seeing across New Zealand. And importantly, we've done that without compromising any services and continuing to invest in our city's future. But we know that that is still a challenge. The overall proposed rates increase of 5.58%, because there's been a slight adjustment following finance and performance last week, has been delivered through a mixture of savings and approach. And Leah Scales, my Chief Financial Officer, will give a little bit more detail about that shortly. We know each and every one of us in council or sat round the governance table wish to ensure that we have our budgets no bigger than they need to be in order to set the rate. And quite realistically, we don't want to charge residents rates for projects that can't be realistically delivered in this coming year. But this year is also unusual because we've also had to undertake the revaluation of property, which again happens every 3 years, and the last time was in 2019. And the QV figures have significantly increased values across the residential properties in the borough. And to be clear, and I know people don't always believe this, that does not affect the total rates that are collected by the council. Our pie does not increase, it remains the same. But it is the distribution within that has changed or will change. And those new values apply on the 1st of July 2023, which is the date the rates will also commence for the new year. So looking at all those changes, both globally and locally, it has been a trickier balancing act than, I'm not sure what normal is at the moment, but normally. But finding that balance is the work that we have done collectively together. And I want to thank each and every elected member and the mayor and staff from across the organisation, because you will see staff present today. They are the vanguard, but that everybody is involved in setting the budget, and for the hard work of getting us to this point. But there's just one little reminder. Today is not about adopting the budget. You're not deciding the rates today. You're actually, hopefully, deciding on the consultation document that will go out to the public. And if you could please keep that in the forefront of your minds, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. We'll now go into item 3. Now, this is just putting the draft annual plan on the table. I'll invite Councillor McClellan, Deputy Chair of Audit and Risk Management Committee, to provide a very detailed update
Hey, look,
on the committee's recommendations. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. I'm happy to introduce a recommendation from Audit and Risk Management Committee. Kim Wallace, who is our independent chair, would normally do so, but she's unavailable today. As everyone here will know, Audit and Risk is a very process committee. We focus on the process, and I can confirm that indeed we are happy that the process has been sound, robust, and that the committee is more than satisfied to sign off the annual plan.
Thank you, Jake. I will now note that the Audit and Risk Management Committee recommendation 1, which is up on the screen.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm happy to move it, and Councillor Scander is happy to second.
You got that, Sam? Yep. Okay, so we'll do... Yeah, but do we got no, there's no questions. Any questions? No, I don't think so. So we'll just get into it. Any debate? I'd like to move it. Well, move it then. Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So now I'll invite the council officers to present the annual plan report and a presentation regarding excess water charge. Thank you, Leah. Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Fundamentally today, just before we start talking about excess water, I do think fundamentally we call it annual plan, but it is our budget. So I do think it's appropriate as a CFO just to set your scene a bit about the process and everything we've gone through. So I just want to take a few minutes and just to reiterate what we have been grappling with. So today we are asking you to adopt our draft annual budget for FY24. But this budget was actually set and adopted in June 21 as part of our long-term plan, and this is year 3 of that plan. Today we are asking you to consider changes to our FY24 budget that recognise the impact of things outside our control over the last 2 years when we set the budget, and there have been a lot of changes to the environment we work in. As an example, in its May 2021 monetary policy statement, the Reserve Bank had left the OCR at 0.25%. In their commentary, they said, the committee noted that underlying CPI inflation currently remains slightly below their target midpoint of 2% per annum. A range of domestic and international factors are expected to lift headline inflation above 2% for a period. Members noted that factors are expected to be temporary and include higher international transport costs, disruptions to global raw material supplies, and resulting higher prices for many commodities and administration charges. Now, as we know, things weren't temporary. And in its latest update on the 22nd of February 2023, the Reserve Bank increased the OCR to 4.75%, a 50% point increase. And this time the commentary was a little bit more sombre. The committee agreed that the OCR still needs to increase, as indicated in the November statement, to ensure inflation returns to within its target range over the medium term. While there are early signs of price pressure easing, core consumer price inflation remains too high, employment is still beyond its maximum sustainable level, and near-term inflation expectations remain elevated. 2 years, and that's the change of the landscape that we've been in. The forecast still looks to peak in May 23 at 5.5% and expected to remain over the next 12 months. A similar time frame to what we're looking at today. So while it's very easy to be wise in hindsight, why is this commentary so important to us? Because not only does rising interest rates, rising inflation, high labour demand and disruptions to our supply chain impact us as we grapple to manage our rising costs while still delivering what we agreed in our LTP, it also impacts what our residents can afford to pay in rates increases, something that the Local Government Act requires us to consider when we set our budget. The budget before you still maintains our priorities and our levels of service as set in our LTP in June 21, but it does recognise the impacts of changes on our operating business that have occurred in the last 2 years. The council team, including councillors, have worked hard over the last 5 months to reduce the rates increase position from a starting point of 14.6 back in October. We have recognised that with the impact of supply chain, labour shortage and rising inflation, that our capital program could not be delivered as expected in the LTP. It does not mean the projects are lost or removed, but deferred to ensure we can deliver on what we promise, and we don't need to charge our residents for the costs until we can deliver it. But that wasn't enough. And so we've done more to reduce the operational costs, looking at costs to determine whether we increase by inflation or take a temporary or permanent savings approach. This has all been balanced to recognise the impact on our residents. But what we haven't done, we haven't reduced our levels of service. We haven't compromised our core services by not funding renewals of our 3 water assets, even though they are expected to leave council ownership in June 24. We have taken a considered approach because that is the right thing to do for our residents. Because if we don't, this will cost our residents more in the long run. It does mean we've had to make some tough calls around what projects get deferred in our capital program, and these decisions have been based on where a project is in the life cycle, deferring those things that can be stopped without incurring further costs, what type of resources are required, balancing where the resources required are best sent to deliver in the most effective and efficient way, and what projects have been funded either partially or fully externally with set timeframes to deliver. Adding more budget won't help. We cannot just hire more staff. In this marketplace, they're just not there. Our proposals are based on what is right for the city as a whole, the most efficient approach, and not the impact on individual suburbs. The above has got us down to around the 7 to 8% mark, in line with overall inflation. But recognising the impact of our residents, the fact that this year we also had to do our 3-year revaluation cycle that impacts the proportion of rates paid across suburbs, and the fact that we have an LTP next year, we have proposed some one-off adjustments to help this burden. These one-off changes do not impact our services, but they do reduce our proposed rates increase by about 2%. We've achieved a lot in the last 5 months since we grappled with a 14.6% rates increase, and I ask you to remember these considerations as you debate your projects and changes today and consider the impact of those changes on all our residents. That's that.
Thank you, Leah. And is Yes, so Tim going to talk about the, we'll do the questions for both of them at the same time. So do you want to do the excess water supply targeted rate, please?
Yeah, so the reason we're just doing this briefing today, outside, as you'll go through the day, we'll look at some amendments, but last week in councillor briefing, we did this presentation and we all agreed that it was actually really important for the public to see this. So I apologise, some of you have already seen this, but the public haven't. So I think it's quite important for us just to take the time, because there is a proposed amendment on the table today to change the excess water. So just a bit of background, the excess water targeted rate was introduced in the LTP in June 21. That followed consultations in FY20 and 21 and the LTP. We also received feedback in the 22-23 annual plan. A deferral of the start date to July 22 was agreed to allow for more increased education and time to determine and update our system requirements to enable the billing. A further deferral to the start of October 22 was agreed in the annual plan FY23 in June 22 to allow further education and communication with our residents. The consultation on the excess water targeted rate. The updated annual plan for 2021, we had 885 submissions received and 460 supported them. In the LTP, 403 submissions were received and 206 supported, 130 opposed. And in the annual plan, we didn't actually consult on it because it was already agreed, but we did receive 9 submissions on it. LTP decision in June 21 was that the council support the introduction of the excess water charge for households that use significantly more water than average to help us better manage demand, particularly during the summer months. The proposed excess water charge would apply to any household that uses on average more than 700 litres per day during a 3-month period. And going through, I'm not going to go in detail, but again, the reason it was delayed, the implementation a year, was to actually allow people to actually get the data so they can actually change behaviours. Communications we've done since that, communication supporting the invoices going out, Newsline, social media, Q&As published to Newsline, ongoing digital marketing campaign directing people to the Water Reporter, updates to Water Reporter web pages and brochures, including with invoices with information on remissions, leaks and water use. Public education, we've run and continue to do so an extensive campaign to educate residents about water charges, checking and reducing use and finding and fixing leaks. This has been included dedicated online water reporter, 27,000 letters to residents with high water use, targeted ads, print ads, and as a result, 464,000 plus visits to the water reporter, including 390,000 unique page views. People know that it's there, which is great. Just a reminder, there's a small, this is the where our usage is, and the reminder of this is that there's a small proportion of people who are putting the pressure on our water supply network. 79% of households are using 47% of the water, and as such will not get an invoice. 21% are using 53% of the water. They will get an invoice, but say at $1,400 litres and around the $85 for a quarter. The top 4% of the residents are using a whopping 23% of the water. Now, either a leak is happening or simply they are just using a lot of water, with extensive irrigation systems usually the main cause. But what is happening is it's working. The campaign is working. People are thinking about how they use water, which is fantastic. Millions of litres of water being used, and we've heard from many residents who have found and fixed leaks that did not only help us with the water pressure, but it also helps, in some cases, the damage to their properties when leaks are found within their properties. Residents are changing the way they use water, which is fantastic. And the data backs that up. So you can see from 22, down, the data for 22 is reducing from that 21. But fixing leaks is great, absolutely fundamental, but it isn't enough. As a district, we need to reduce our summer water use to take pressure off our network. And this is why we are focused on leak detection and outdoor water use. Without this demand management, we would need to continue to at least do another 11 additional water wells and associated new pump stations by 2031. We've projected the introduction of the rate and the associated reduction on peak use could result in an estimated $17 million in capital expenditure being deferred in the next 10 years. These couple of these slides are sort of just to make sure the public actually understand this. It doesn't cost us more to actually collect this data than it does to charge. So this is your FY23 total budget. Now this is both commercial and residential. We've always charged for commercial, but we are now doing residential, and the total revenue associated with that. Another one that I want to just talk through very quickly and be very clear is the concern in the public in regards to the equity in regards to shared meters. There has been concern that, you know, we are not charging people in multi-use units, but here's the facts for you. So in the first billing period, so you'll be aware we are just doing our first billing period, of the 25,000 properties that have a shared water meter, only 194 of them would be eligible to receive an invoice if we were charging them. And that is based on the fact that they just, which we've always foreseen, is that they just don't use the same amount of water. Now, of those 194, they are the ones that we will target and look at and establish whether there's leaks, or they will be the first ones we start looking at putting in meters. But on average, the median use for shared connections is 295 litres per household, a lot lower than the per day average. There is still some properties that don't have meters. In certain areas, especially Littleton and Diamond Harbour and the Banks Peninsula settlement, but they do have a restricted supply. And these are the areas that we will look at. But, you know, very little compared as a proportion. So there's 5.7% of all our properties. We read them all meters quarterly, including shared connections, so we are seeing those users. In winter, there are 17,000 properties over the 700 litres a day, and some of this number grows to about 31,000. Now, these numbers I'm showing here are the ones that we've continuously shown in the last year. What is key here is, again, how many people are doing it, but what is key is the next slide, because this is your first stats of actual billing. The bills started going out and are in the mail as we speak. So in January 23, the bills processed, there was 19,000 below the minimum, so that didn't get a bill because they were under the daily limit. There was 16,000 of them. So invoices greater than the daily limit was essentially 4,000, which is around that 20%, which is exactly where we've always predicted. The average invoice is about $78. The median is 62. The highest is 440. Now this is both residential and commercial, okay, so it's not just residential. And the lowest is 23, which is why it says 23 when a minimum for residential is around the 25, okay, so that's a commercial invoice. Now, what we have done, and as we have stopped any invoices at the moment to review anything gone over that's over 450, so we can review it to make sure and talk to the residents. We will look at their data. These are individual invoices that we have stopped without just sending, so we can review them. We will look at their past usage, and if there's a blip or something, we will contact them. So we are not just sending bills, we are actually taking considered effort to actually go, these don't look normal. We will look at their past history. Okay? Rates remission. We do have a rates remission policy. We recognise that there are some families for different reasons that are impacted, and so you can request a remission and they will be considered. Most reasons are for personal medical reasons, or you do have a large family members living in the residence, and we will consider those. And as we said, from an operational point of view, while the rate is set at 700 litres per day, from an operational point of view, we are not sending a bill unless you are actually over that $25 for residential, simply because the fact it just becomes uneconomical. But that's an operational matter that we've considered. The rate is at from 700, and if you are over the 900 or over the $25, you will get a bill from 700 litres a day. So we have a proposed amendment on the table. Just to be clear, what we can't do, we can't stop billing in the current year. We are already billing, and we can't change the rate for the current year. So any decision that is made today to change the rate for next year, if it does go through, the current year status and invoices are still payable, still chargeable, because the rate was set last year. We can't consult in the draft end to remove the excess water charge in FY24. That is a special considered procedure. It was a rate that was set as the LTP, so it needs to have a separate process. The proposed amendment on the table is to increase the daily allowance for excess water charging for residential to 900 litres per day from the 1st of July 23. So as I've explained a lot of this, we currently charge from 700, but usually the $25 limit doesn't hit until 900. Whilst we can consult with the residents in our annual plan to move the charging rate, we cannot charge the rate so significantly it ends up changing the concept of the rate. But you cannot do this for the current year. This has to be impacted for next year. This will impact rates increases depending on how you move the rate. This will in effect shift the burden of excess water use onto all ratepayers. It will increase your general rate and will lessen the impact of changing behaviour. Some people will not change behaviour until they actually receive a bill. Financial impact of the proposed amendment is moving to a 900, so it will have a 0.1% rates increase. Now, this doesn't take into account if we do put an operational adjustment to it. So we say, look, we're not going to invoice under 25 or 20 or 15, so it will be more cost. So we haven't worked through that yet. But we would likely reduce it from 25 down a bit lower, I would imagine, to have less of an impact. And the staff recommendation is that we do not recommend in changing the excess water targeted rate limit. It's been consulted on 2 times already with majority of support. We have commenced billing in line with previous council decision, and any indication the charge is changing will impact on our ability to recover this debt. The inequity that has been discussed around shares meters is not accurate, with only 194 properties actually being in excess. And when the 700 litre limit was agreed, it was based on the fact that the average Christchurch household uses 540 litres per day, which is the highest household water use of all largest cities in New Zealand. Increasing the limit will move the rates charged from excess users to all ratepayers. And that's it. Now, in the public documents, there is a lot of examples of customers on the water reporter, but I'm not going to go through them, but both yourself and the public can see those. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Leah. That was very good. Now, have we got any specific questions on what Leah's just talked about, water? Don't worry about the annual plan stuff. We'll go back to that because this is quite an important thing. So we've got Yanni and then Tim.
Yeah, thank you. One of the concerns that's been raised is that it's unfair to only charge people with meters when other people don't have meters who aren't being charged. Have we done a Bill of Rights assessment or a human rights assessment around the fairness of what we're doing? Like, how do we justify the fact that, like, people in Littleton, for example, wouldn't be charged?
To answer your question, no, we haven't done a human rights assessment on it, but we're saying it's 5.4% of all properties that don't have a meter. Some of them include vacant land, so it's not just all properties and households. That includes other things as well.
But is there any what I'm trying to understand, I guess, is there any principle in law or in the Local Government Act that would mean that it would be inherently unjust to only charge people because they had meters and not charge people because they didn't have meters?
The only comment I would make, Councillor Johansson, is that the decision today is not to remove the excess water charge. You've actually already agreed to that. So whether the daily limit is 700 as it currently is or 900, which is what the proposed amendment is, that inequity that you are talking about would still be there. So we can't change that.
Other question I had was, in terms of people being able to, like, the water report is great,
Yep.
so it's a really good tool for people. In terms of people understanding what the trends are over time, is everyone now able to look at the annual trend in terms of their water use? So they understand
the individual trend?
The impact will be on, like, future billing?
We haven't forecasted that for individual properties, no.
We haven't forecasted, but they will be able to look at the history. We've been putting it in the water reader report. It has how many? 18 months of data.
Yeah. Would be around there.
Thank you, Yanni. That's cool. Tim?
Thank you. Just 2 quick questions, Your Honour. First, to the mover, you're proposing just for the residential properties. So,
Just questions
okay.
to
Sorry. Well,
officers.
then the first question: the daily limit, if it was charged from 700 litres, which is agreed already to 900, that would then remove the rates remission requirement or the process with residential. Would that be correct? Or that could be a possibility? There wouldn't be need for any of that at all?
It would lessen the impact of that, but it wouldn't remove it totally.
But we could, for instance, that could be part of a discussion if it went further?
I think you're always going to have a rates remission policy, because there's always going to be exceptions, especially medical reasons.
Yep.
And so I would strongly recommend that you don't remove any rates remission. I mean, they get assessed on a fair and equitable way. And the remission policy is there for a reason.
Cool, thank you.
Victoria.
Thank you. My question is about the equity issue, but not in relation to the shared meters, Leah. It's whether we have any old infrastructure. Some people say, yeah, but I've got an old water meter reader, so it's not compatible with our current technology. Have we got an issue? And do we have any figures on how many old meters are out there that for people who aren't being read or receiving bills, and then what the plan is to upgrade those to new modern technology?
Yeah, so over the last 2 or 3 months, we have replaced around 1,200 of the very old meters. So they've been done, and we'll keep an eye on the ones using a whole heap of water and look to replace those over time as well.
However, just to add, if my memory serves me correctly, Tim, in briefings, haven't we also been clear that actually the older meters would might be reading just slightly under, they wouldn't be overcharging people?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and we've got lots of good data on that over the years.
That's helpful, thank you. I just wanted to touch on it in the public briefing.
Cool. Tyler?
Yes, he's got airtime.
Hi there. I just wanted to track back to a question on slide 20 is around if we go up to 900 litres, would the burden be placed upon other ratepayers that are historically working within that 700 litre mark?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is you're increasing your general rate. The rates increase will increase, so everyone gets it on a CV
Sure.
rate, obviously.
So essentially, those that are doing really good are still paying for ones that are using
Correct.
excess water?
Yep.
Okay, that's my only question.
Pauline?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
If the rate was, the trigger rate, should we call it, was moved up to 900, would people then be allowed to use 1,100 before they got a bill?
No, that will be an operational decision that we will have to make. The only reason we allow that is not to give people more access. There's always a balance between how much it actually costs us to run
That's
an
right.
invoice.
I mean, I would assume that you would retain that, because at $25 it's not viable to send an invoice for that amount.
Yeah, but what we will need to do is assess how many are in that. So it's not per invoice so much, it's going how many people are in that. So what is the lost revenue if we didn't charge anything? And
Right.
I don't think it will be $25 an invoice. It will be less. So that's why I haven't given you the data of what that number will be, because we'll have to assess, because a lot of people are actually in that 700 to 900, or they'll get a bill, but to the 1,100,
Yeah.
right? So we'll need to assess the impact of that and determine what we actually invoice at. But that will be an operational matter. It's not driven by the targeted rate.
Okay, so therefore I can't understand how it's going to change anything if people don't get billed under 900 now, really. And you
They
suggest...
do, because if you're 901, right?
You get charged from 7
You get
here.
charged from 700.
Yeah.
That's the key.
So if at 900, that's getting up to double the average allowance that people consume,
Yep.
and you feel that that wouldn't actually encourage or show the savings that we've seen so far, the 10%?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, two questions. One is using the term burden, it could be a little misleading, because if someone's already paid 20 times more than another house for their share of the delivery of their 720 litres, it's not very accurate to say that they're now, if they use an extra 100 litres a day, that they're passing the burden on to someone else. They're already carrying the burden of because of the way we rate. They're already carrying the lion's share of the rates bill for water anyway.
Yep. The only thing that you're assuming there is that all excess water users are in the higher CV areas.
I didn't assume anything.
No,
I'm just
saying,
going to the word
yeah,
burden.
but what I'm saying, yeah, I agree. So you're right. But excess water users are across the city. So someone that is paying less than general rate because their CV is lower could also be paying. Could it be also an excess water user? So I'm just saying, it could be a burden. It's not always the higher CV areas that are paying the excess water charges.
Yeah, but assuming that someone's, saying that there's a burden being passed by those people, I think, is quite misleading when they've already paid 20 times more for. We don't do that with any other service delivery. Power and petrol and bread is the same for everyone, but tax is very uneven. The harder the work, the more you pay.
And the second question?
The second question is around the one Yanni raised on the human rights issue. Why would we not at least look into that during the coming months before we sign off the annual plan, just in case there's something in it, rather than waiting a year or whatever and we end up in court and someone actually else is right? Not saying they are, but would we not be wise to at least explore that, to rule it out?
Leah, do you mind if legal answer that
That's
question?
what I was going to say.
That's all right. Thank you.
If I can just confirm the advice that I gave last year and the year before that this rate would not have been put before you if it wasn't one that was open for the council to be able to make.
Okay, so that is confirming there's no chance that what he's raised could be true.
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that.
Well, you've said for the last 3 years that what Yanni's raised would not be true because we wouldn't do a rate that couldn't be done. So when people are sending us emails saying that that they would take legal action, they couldn't.
They could well take legal action.
Yeah.
My advice to this council has consistently been that this is a rate that is open to the council to make, and that we are very well placed to defend any legal action that is taken.
Brilliant, thank you. And then finally, the meters themselves. I've received an email this week where someone asked about, are they being calibrated? Because theirs was well out and they tested everything and there was no leaks and whatever. The meter was not operating properly. So are they being calibrated?
No, they're not being calibrated. We'd have to look at that specific incident, but we have got really good data on old historic meters that show they do typically underread. But no, they're not calibrated.
But if a particular resident, as we've been very clear in the last 2 years, if they've got a specific concern, they've done what you've just said, Aaron, they've checked it all, that there's no leaks, and they still have a concern, if they come to us, we will investigate it and send someone out to look at it.
Thank you, Leah. Sam?
Thank you, Leah. So this is just a really basic question, just so I've got it very clear in my mind. So the 25,000 shared meters across the city, we effectively we add the units that are on that shared meter together, so to speak, and divide it by the daily limits.
Correct.
In a sense. And we noted that there's 194 that will exceed that, so they're not being billed, are they?
No, because say you've got one property that's got 3 units on it, right? There's only 1 meter for it, so we know if we took the 3 and we would, so if they're exceeding 2100, right? But we don't know which of those 3 units is exceeding, so we're not charging. We can't. Do you know what I mean? Because it could be the back unit that's doing 2,000 of it and the other 2 not. So but what we would do in that example is we would go out, we'd look at the trend over the last, all the data we've got, and if that shared meter for that property, for those 3 properties, has been consistently up at that level, then we would actually look into it, make contact with them and actually see if there's potentially leaks, or we would target, and if we can't see any of that, we would target those properties to actually go in and put meters in, individual meters. Okay. So they're the ones we will target because they are excess.
Right, yeah, so at the moment they're not being charged.
Correct.
So, and the other one, I think it was Aaron's already raised, it was just to clarify for Tyler around the capital value, but that's okay.
Celeste, and just remember we've got a long way to go today.
This is a very quick one from me. I'm just curious to know, in terms of soil types, have you noticed that there is some areas that, because of, they might have sandier soils, that has a larger impact on their water usage?
Those areas are using more water, but that's consistent with other areas around town that also have a different soil type. But across the city, last time we looked at the data, there was a pretty even spread.
Thank you, and thank you guys. Now, if we could have the rest of the officers up to talk to us about the annual plan, because otherwise we'll be here till midnight. Thank you. And I'm right behind you.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. Right, to bring it back to the overall annual plan, I'm just going to do a little overview and process look, and I'll try and keep it brief. And then we'll go into some of the specifics of the big levers around how we got to the rates position we are. Of course, we've got Russell Holden, Head of Finance, here with us. We've also got support from the Heads of Service on specific issues if you need that. Right, okay, just to put the whole thing in perspective, annual plans and LTPs are always a triangle between the services and projects we deliver, the cost of those, and the rates number we produce. And we're here to try to get the balance of those three things right. If we only get one corner right and the others not, then we've done a disservice to our community. So that's the ethos behind how we've built this plan as a team of staff and councillors. The way we did that was a series of briefings over what feels like many months. I think it was starting in October. Some of those briefings were in the public arena before any conclusions had been reached, in an effort to be clear and transparent about the thinking and the levers involved. That's a process that we've been doing for a couple of years now, and I think it's worthwhile. There are a number of major levers to how we got here, but Mr. Chair, I'd just like a little bit of direction. We've got 10 amendments to consider. Some of them are quite substantive in terms of detail. I'm proposing that rather than line by line the report, we talk about the major shifts in levers and field any questions on those, rather than trying to line by line a very extensive report.
Do you want me to? So can you give the overview, Peter, which we're expecting in terms of the amendments? We've got a process to go through for that, so please don't worry about those.
Understood. Okay, the major levers that got us from 14.6 raw start of all the costs and increases we were facing were the ongoing program of savings and efficiencies within staff that's managed by the CEO, reducing the capital program to a deliverable level, and I know that you councillors have heard that rationale ad infinitum, ad nauseum now, but for the benefit of those watching, it was a very strong application of evidence around what we can deliver in terms of the capital projects and program in this environment. Basically, anybody who's trying to get anything built or run a business knows that just simply planning to do something isn't going to translate into action at the moment. Everybody's looking for skills, everybody's looking for ability to deliver. So we worked hard on the capital program and brought it down by a significant amount through rephasing rather than cutting, to get to a program of $460 million approximately. That will keep the city moving forward. It will enable us to do the repairs that our residents are asking for and to keep the assets running. Part of that is our intention to hand Three Waters over in the planned handover by central government in a fit-for-purpose state. We're not cutting that series of activities short. We're not shortchanging them. And the last one was a series of one-off reforms that financial adjustments that are not sustainable over time. That brought us down from 14.6 to about 7.5, 7.7, and then those one-offs took us down to the current 5.58, 5.6. Now we can field questions about those in some detail, and I anticipate there's probably some questions around the capital rephasing. If they're part of the amendments, I'd propose that they be put on hold until we do that process, rather than overlapping and messing it up. So look, there are also some smaller items. There's some property disposals in there. They're not a financial lever to bring the rates down. They're simply about better use of land and our land portfolio.
And if members have any questions in relation to that, we do have Bruce
online
to go on Zoom, and it'll just take us a couple of minutes just to bring him in.
Yep. He's confirmed that he's on standby to answer those questions. And lastly, there are some relatively minor changes to levels of service. They don't change the services our public gets. They're mainly housekeeping, and they're mainly driven by external factors around clearer measurement, wording, and so forth, methodology. But we will go through them. And then, of course, there's a separate process around amendments. I guess rather than going into the internal mechanisms around the savings that the staff found, probably better to move on to the capital rephasing and any questions around that. I realise that you've done this several times already, but just in case there are any clarifications that need to be made.
Questions, overall questions.
Right.
This is specifically around capital rephasing, if there are any.
Yeah, but you have finished?
I've finished the overview, yes.
Okay.
So,
right. These are questions on everything except the amendments.
Correct.
Okay,
So capital rephasing, the one-offs, the property disposal, and the level of service changes.
Absolutely. So, Yanni, did you have your hand up, mate?
Yeah, yep. Thank you. So just, I'm just concerned in the consultation document that the capital rephasing isn't really clear. So if I take transport, for example, in terms of the craft projects, it's really not clear to the community why they're being rephased or what the options are. So is there something that we can put in that would show people? Because I think it's hard. I mean, how does the community have the ability to make submissions if they don't know what resources required to deliver each thing, if it's not about the money?
So under the section changes to the capital program and the process part about reviewing the program and the impacts of supply chain costs, reforms and so forth, are you suggesting there should be more detail there about why scaling to deliverable size is required? Is that the detail you're looking for?
So if people want to make submissions to the draft annual plan, what I'm trying to understand is normally people would make submissions saying, you know, we don't want the budget deferred, but how do they make a submission based on deliverability that can be considered? Do they need to know what the FTEs are associated to each project, or what the percentage of resource is required in terms of deliverability, so that they can make informed decisions?
Look, I'm not sure that can be answered in terms of every capital project being treated the same way. I think that the reality of it is that some projects are deferred for some reasons and others for different reasons. Supplying FTEs on every project may not be helpful to the public. I think that the explanations provided on why they're being deferred, so over the page, 3 waters, transport projects, waste projects, there is an explanation behind each of the major changes there as to why it's occurring. So I'm struggling a little bit, I guess.
Right, so if people want to make submissions on the craft project, they don't support craft being rephased. We've spent $200,000 out of $5 million in a year. They want us to get on and deliver it, and they don't want the budgets pushed out. How do they make a submission that we can consider in terms of the budget rephasing if they don't know what resources are required to actually deliver it?
I think the answer to that would be really much the same as every other service we offer, which is that they express their view of what they want us to do without necessarily having to understand exactly every detail of how the project works and its funding and its resourcing. They're simply expressing the wish that it be moved to this position rather than explaining to us how we would achieve that, because that's a level of technical knowledge that you just wouldn't expect of the public.
And that would then be a matter of debate in the budget for elected members on advice from officers.
Well, except if we look at last year, Gloucester Street was a classic example where the amendment was ruled out of order, and yet we've only spent 10% of that budget for this current financial year. So, you know, and we hear all sorts about, oh, we can't deliver it or we can deliver it, but actually we didn't deliver it, and we've put money on budget that we haven't spent, and yet people's submissions, lead to us not being able to make amendments. So, but anyway, I just wondered whether the craft ones we could actually just have a chart in the consultation document that showed what the options are. If people want the craft stuff delivered as per the LTP timeframe, that they can clearly see, what they need to make a submission towards. Because at the moment, if you read what it says about craft, it just says, with support from external funding, the Regeneration Acceleration Facility and Climate Emergency Response Fund, we're still prioritising our community-focused safety and environmental programs and projects. And it goes, we're proposing deferring a number of transport projects at 4.4 to make up use of the 23.1 million of SURF. But it doesn't kind of say that we're deferring X amount of craft, and if we wanted to keep that on budget, here's what it would require.
Okay. Look, we'll take advice from the communications
Lynette's on
team.
her way down.
Yep.
And I think, Lynette, it would be appropriate because it was debated in public in the Finance and Performance Committee, and the specific information that was given to the elected members around CRAF. Not the detail, but the graph.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Which I'm sure Councillor Johansson remembers.
Kia ora koutou everyone. Just to follow up on the CREF conversation, the budgets have been, just to be really, really clear in the public domain, the budgets have been rephased to meet the proposed delivery programs that were set once the decisions were made from the community boards, which was late last year, late 21. Sorry, I have to try. The budgets was rephased. No, it was last year. Once the decisions were made, we have been in the budget phasing that is proposed in this annual plan is consistent with those and is consistent with the briefing that you had at Finance and Performance about the CRAF. We have not changed that. We have set that in. The budgets have stayed the same. They have been set to meet the delivery profile for the programs following the decisions.
Okay, it's good answer. Yeah, thank you very much. Is there any more questions on this part? Celeste?
This is a question for Bruce.
For Bruce,
yeah.
Let's just get Bruce up there. Can we take any other questions while we just
Any
get
other
Bruce
questions while we're waiting for Bruce? No, that's good. Well, we can get Bruce online. Do you want to carry on a bit more, Peter?
I can email Bruce if that's
Would you
easier.
mind?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
We don't need him.
Ask about the consultation document specifically.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Peter, have you got any more?
I was just going to add that I think as a general principle, the staff advice would be that the community should submit on what they want.
Whatever they want.
But how it can be achieved at a technical level, like what's happening in the market and resourcing and so forth, are issues for staff to put in front of councillors as part of the debate, rather than expecting the public to know those things.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So that's the, I guess, overview around capital rephasing, and I think Leah, as CFO, has talked about the one-offs and the inability to sustain them in every plan over time. This has been a special year. We're aware of the stresses, financial stresses in the community. So those one-offs, which were a significant lever in getting the rates down, I think it is fair to stress that they are not something we can pull out of the hat every year. Which really leads us on to the property disposal component. Now, as I said, this is not a money-making thing. This is really about council's land portfolio and whether it's the right mix of land. The list is there. I don't think there are too many surprises on it. I guess we've got Bruce online. Is there any questioning around that at all?
So obviously Councillor Celeste Donovan is emailing a question to Bruce, which we'll respond. I can see a hand up from Sarah Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Sarah.
Thanks. I'm just on the property disposal. So there's a significant number of residential red zone sections from the Port Hills, and I know that the fact of them came to the community board at a briefing last week.
Yep.
And there's also some housing units. So I've just got questions about those. The Port Hills residential ones, the briefing, which I wasn't able to attend because I was away, talks about a public benefit review that's going to be done by April this year, and then community board input in May, and then going to council in May, June. That doesn't seem to be quite what's happening here, with it just going straight into the annual plan with a random list of properties, because it talks about, mechanism for property divestment not yet determined, intention clarified as part of the first tranche of reports. We don't really have a full report on these properties. It's just kind of a list of properties to consult on.
Okay.
So
We've
Bruce
got
will
Bruce
need
right
to-
here.
There we are.
There is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bruce, I don't know if you caught all of that from Councillor Templeton.
Yes, so I think that there are two different sections of the Port Hills residential red zone that are being referred to. So the first lot that was referred to, that was briefed to the community board, it was the 600 properties that were transferred across from the Crown. Prior to those properties being transferred, a small number, council had already identified that it wished to dispose of those, and had already made decisions on that matter to dispose of those. Those properties have been treated separately to the remaining amount. What we're doing in this case is retesting that council still wishes to proceed with its previous decision to sell these properties, and testing with the community, because that previous decision wasn't made with the community. In future years, any decisions that will come out from the remaining 600 will be referred through the LTP and annual plan in this process for disposal as well. Although, as I briefed you back in November, we will still retain that option to bring those separately to you if that's preferred to deliver as well.
Okay, so just checking then, the properties that are listed in the draft annual plan are the same ones as beforehand?
Yes, they are.
2017 decision, okay.
Yes.
And
Yep.
would any decision in the annual plan to sell them supersede we had a resolution which asked them to be offered back to prior property owners first? Would that resolution then be rescinded? I know it's difficult to just trace people, but if we're able to do a broad sort of advertising campaign saying, hey, listen, these properties are up if it goes through?
Yes, and that's, as we discussed when we briefed you on this, we would be looking to do that in a practical, pragmatic way that allowed for people to be made aware, but we can't guarantee that we will be able to contact every previous owner or every previous red zone owner.
Yeah. And when it comes to the kind of best for city approach, while we are quite keen to be able to sell some of these properties that we don't need and not have to maintain them anymore, and they're suitable for housing, which is great, when it comes to the rest of the Port Hills red zone land, when are we getting the big overview of best for city, which might include more sales? Is that before the next tranche of sales?
It will be before the next tranche. I understand that the timing is we're heading towards about a May date for bringing those matters back to council, and then we'll be looking at implementing any decisions out of that over time after that.
Great. And
can I just also go back, Councillor? You did mention in your first part just some housing properties that we're looking to dispose of. So those properties are ones that have reached the end of their useful life in general, and they need to be redeveloped. Because of the policy settings of government, it's better for the community sector providers to redevelop those properties because they can get funding that the council cannot. But the rules of that funding mean that they have to own the property. So what we're looking at is disposing of these properties to community housing providers for them to redevelop affordable community housing in line with council strategy. So we still get the outcomes, but those community groups get that funding towards it. And in most cases, the residents the tenants will be better off because they will be paying less rent. So it's a win-win-win situation. So that's the reason why we're putting these ones forward, to get to that win-win-win.
That's great. And will that be clear throughout the information we've got? Because it will look like council is just disposing of its social housing, and that we will formally own less, but that actually the city numbers stay the same.
We'll make sure that that's very clear.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, have you finished everything now, Peter?
Just about. There's one minor thing to go, just in the interest of transparency. There are some level of service changes, only a handful, and they're really housekeeping. The Department of Internal Affairs has given us some, well, they've called it guidance, but they're really not asking, about how we measure a couple of our water measures, and that is to move away from what was relevant in the past, which is specific targets, to simply say compliant with their legislation. So there's a direction around how the method of measurement occurs. The second one is simply to reflect some delays in the opening of Matataki and Parakiore, so that we're not asking people to get attendance at things that aren't actually open yet. And lastly, the Christchurch NZ people have sought some changes to the economic development outputs that they produce, and they've listed those there. So, as I said, relatively small number of changes. One of them is actually not open to debate. That's the DIA one. And the others are open to any questions you might have. And failing that, we move on to the amendments.
Okay, thank you very much. All good? Good. Right, I will now, we will now suspend standing orders so that we can deal with the councillor amendments. I will move it and Pauline will second it. All those, put it straight to vote, yeah, no debate. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. So we are now, the council must, this is recommendation 2 and amendments. The council must adopt the information that is relied on by the content of the consultation document before adopting the consultation document. So I'll move this and Sam is going to second it. So there's no vote on this at this point. I will now open the matter up for discussion and amendments. Councillors have received numerous briefings on the annual plan with ample opportunity to provide input to help shape the draft document. Councillors also had an opportunity to send amendments through in advance. If there are any amendments raised today, we may not be able to put these up without due consideration of legal, financial and other matters. After each amendment, there will be a break while staff are given the opportunity to provide advice on including potential impact on rates and or the draft financial statement. A reminder, please keep noting and comments to the debate rather than via amendments. Once all the amendments have been dealt with, there will be a further break to confirm the total financial impact of any changes. So, we now go to...
So before you go to amendments, Mayor, I have asked finance colleagues, Russell in particular, just to give us what we believe would be the ballpark figure impact on rates if all amendments were likely to pass, so you have the context. Russell.
Now, one thing I can say now that we've got standing orders out of the way, I want, when we do the questions, I'd like only the maximum of 3 questions per councillor, otherwise we will be here all day. Some will do none and some will do 101. So just keep the questions very pointed and on target. So. Good, so we'll start with number 1.
So can I just get Russell's answer to my question?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Russell.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and good morning, everybody. So there's a number of amendments there, and look, not many at this point have a rates impact because the dollars haven't been quantified. So what I can say is there's a couple of, they're focused on the UAGC. Now that won't impact the total rates take at all, but it will alter the distribution of rates. So we can cover that when we get to that. we include the excess water charging, as Lee has already pointed out, if that move was to move it from 700 to the 900 litres per day, that would be an additional 0.1%.
Yeah, so I'm not looking at the individual ones because we'll deal with that in each amendment, Russell. I just want to understand for members' benefit what we believe the overall impact is likely to be if we adopted all amendments.
Okay,
Ballpark.
so it would
But we will give you time to do that. We won't drop you in it.
No. There's two, okay, that we can add. And one is the excess water, and the other is the reduction in the use of the CEF fund. And so that would be 0.18 added on, so then that would be 5.86%, moving it from
Isn't it
5.08.
0.08? Isn't it 0.08?
Sorry, is it 0.016?
Yeah, so that's half there.
Yeah, so
Point-
that takes it from
0.08.
Okay,
0.16. So 0.08.
that's what I
So
thought.
0.08 if it was moved from 1 million to 500,000 is a move, additional rate take of 0.08.
Okay, so now we'll start with number one.
I still haven't got an answer to the question,
Right,
clearly.
here comes the answer to the question that Dawn asked, Russell.
5.76%.
Thank you.
The one she just got the answer to, what the number is. Yeah, correct.
So it would move from 5.58 to 5.76. Ballpark.
Okay.
Just
All
with
right.
those two.
Just two of them, okay?
Okay, thank you,
Right,
Russell.
we will now start with amendment number one, and you guys have all got these. So I call on councillor Fields to move your amendment.
Can I just check on the wording here, please?
Yeah.
So is the wording that I can see in front of me, is that the wording that we're voting on?
Up there, mate.
Amendment
Oh,
one?
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I mean, I'd prefer to adjust that wording if possible. Can I do that? Yeah, it's not how how do we do that?
So would you like to tell us what you'd like?
Yep.
Because I think we've taken what you'd originally sent, so.
Yep, no worries. That council fund the head-to-head walkway at an equivalent level to the previous financial year and engage with the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust with a view to forming a partnership to deliver it.
Can you email it?
Yep.
I think you just need to
Yep.
email it.
Yeah, we'll go and see them and we'll go to
We'll
number
come
I'll email
back
it
to
through.
you. So that's if that is
So
materially
move on and I'll,
different.
yep.
Okay,
What was suggested.
We'll now do number two. Councillor McClellan, would you like to move your amendment?
Happy to move. Are we introducing these or are we just moving them? Or are we introducing them quickly?
Introducing them quickly.
Okay, very quickly then.
And then staff will talk about it
Yeah,
if
sure.
we need to.
Yes, you do need a seconder.
Have you got a seconder?
I'm sure I probably do.
Yeah.
Plenty.
Seconder?
Tyler.
Okay, a few of them.
Lucky you.
Hey, look, I'm putting this up because it's a conversation that I think we should probably have often. We haven't yet had it, and really that's about the redistributive element of our rating system and making sure, we have a good rating system. Most of it's progressive, most of it's fair, but a portion of it isn't, and I think that we should discuss with the public over whether they think that no matter how much your home is worth, you would be paying the same uniform annual general charge, or whether actually we means test it and base it on capital value.
So just to be clear, that Jake has presented it, we're not debating it. We can ask questions of staff on it. The debating bit comes later. So if you've got any questions, make sure the question's not debate. Is that okay? So you all done, Jake?
Thank you. Staff
Staff,
advice.
would you like to tell us anything?
We've got some slides, don't we? Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that even with the UAGC set at $153, which is our proposal, fixed charges as a whole are actually falling because one of the other big fixed charges, which is the wheelie bin one, excuse me, the waste minimisation rate is falling by more than the UAGC is going up, if that makes sense. So under our proposal, actually rates for low value properties are increasing by a lower percentage than for higher value properties already. Also, I think it's worth bearing in mind that if we're interested in targeting, particular deprivation, the UAGC is a reasonably blunt instrument at targeting particular things like that. So, for example, if you reduce the UAGC, people who benefit from that include low-value vacant land, things like Orion's transformer boxes. They've got a lot of those, green boxes. Lord only knows what they do. But they have got a low value. Yeah. And they would benefit a lot from the reduction in UAGC, as would things like malls that have a lot of UAGC, because there's a UAGC for each shop, in a mall. Another factor to bear in mind is the rates rebate is really probably our best way of targeting deprivation. The maximum amount of, this is the government funded rates rebate, the maximum amount of that is 700, so it's actually quite a lot larger than our fixed charges. And I've given an example here. If a house is worth about 400k, then based on our proposed rates increase, they'll be paying an extra $94 per year. But each year this rates rebate goes up, and let's say it goes up by $50, which is a rough guess. No one knows what it's going to go up by until late in June. But if that goes up by $50, then our house here will actually have a rates increase of only $44. So it's good to kind of bear in mind what's happening with the rates rebate at the same time. Just finished with a couple of things that council's costs are driven, by a number of different things, and the UAGC sort of reflects the idea that, population numbers and the number of rating units drive a portion of our costs. And that last little point that is somewhat hidden, oh yes, that's right, a relatively minor point that in the LTP, if we want to do things like provide people with wheelie bin size choice, a big red bin, a small red bin, whatever, we would generally have to have fixed charges, for those bin sizes, so that you pay more for a bigger red bin or whatever. And if we do that, that means that we'd probably at the same time want to reduce the UAGC to avoid fixifying more of our charges, if that makes any sense. No. At the moment our red bin is recovered on a capital value, basis, and if we make people pay based on bin size, then we'd be having a fixed charge type thing for red bin.
Just yeah. You're right, it is very minor.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
It's good to bring it up.
I'll go on now.
So just to, one question I'd like to throw in there. If this fails when it goes through in the next tranche, so to speak, we have got a foreshadowed motion by Yanni that if it went down to $25, have you got any sort of info that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. So this graph here is at $50 UAGC. So we've chosen here to look at the impact on the average residential property in each of those suburbs. And the blue line is based on our proposed level of UAGC, and the suburbs are ordered from left to right in increasing order of that blue bar. And so that's with UAGC at 153. If we reduce the UAGC to $50, then those orange bars are going to be the average rates increase for each suburb. So obviously some go up, some go down. Overall, you've got a broadly similar amount of variance, if you like, between suburbs. But some will benefit, some won't. Also, it's worth bearing in mind, obviously, if you reduce the UAGC to such a large extent, low-value houses will actually get a rates decrease. And you can look at the table of different size ratepayers. The next table is it looks extremely similar because the UAGC here is going down just a little bit more, from 153 now to 25. It looks very similar. You'll just see that the orange bars are slightly exaggerated more compared with the previous diagram.
And the differential changes.
Okay, and I should just say also that when the UAGC reduces, the business differential also changes. I've had to adjust that to make sure that businesses are not paying a different proportion of overall rates.
All right, thank you. Sam, and then Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not sure if it's a question for you or the legal team. I'm just trying to understand, with the excess water charge, we were unable to remove it next year because we'd have to go and publicly consult. Yet to me, dropping this from 153 to 50 or 25 seems like quite a significant change in policy. What's the difference, and what's the threshold around why we can do what Jake's after versus why we can't with water charge? So I don't know if that's a legal question or just trying to understand the threshold.
It might be both legal and CFO because there are two different bits.
Yes, thank you. If I may start. So differences with the water charges, we're talking about a targeted rate, which was for a specific purpose. And altering or removing, the key thing to bear in mind is, are we undermining the purpose of the rate? This is a general rate, which has a different basis. So unless the whole rate was being removed, that would need to be a special consultative procedure. But tweaking that or changing the figure is allowable.
Okay, but the advice that came through with the excess water charge was that if we increase the rate too much to make the rate null and void, then effectively we couldn't do it. Whereas this is dropping it substantially. Is it not the same purpose or intent behind effectively what's happening here?
The difference with the targeted rate is that it has a purpose to reduce the water usage and the impact on the infrastructure. This is a general rate that applies to everybody.
Yes, I get that. Sorry, this will be because we're only allowed 3, this is it. So I have to word it very, very carefully, and there's many parts to it. What I'm trying to get to is, so any general rate we can amend to make the rate null and void?
No. The figures before you are not null and void, there's still a figure. Then it's not a...
Even though it's a material change?
It's a change in the figure, but it is still a general rate that applies to everybody.
Yeah. I'll talk to Leah at morning tea.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, the properties in the lower value sort of suburbs who would see a rates decrease from this, do we have any idea of, I'm generally in favour of that, but do we have any idea of how many of those are rentals, so that it's the landlords who'd be pocketing the difference rather than actually being passed on to sort of lower income homeowners?
We haven't done that.
Yeah, is that information available though? Like, do we have that kind of information so we can make that kind of analysis? Because what I wouldn't like to see is us decreasing rates and landlords pocketing it rather than it going into those who need it the most. Like, whether there's other ways for us to support people.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think that information will be around.
Yeah.
And I've made some initial inquiries to get that and start having a look at it, but I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, because it would be really useful. Thanks.
I think the question becomes, is it readily available or is it something that's very difficult to secure because there's a difference?
Yeah.
Okay. Yanni? Thank you, sir.
Thanks. I was just interested in the business differential, in terms of not reducing that, would that have much change to the graph?
So your question is, if we reduced UAGC but kept the business differential at 2.22, it would make a big difference to the graph.
In what way would it make a difference?
Residential properties would face much lower rates increases because business would be paying a lot more.
So do we have a graph that shows what that would be?
Not right now, but it wouldn't take me long to produce one.
I suggest we do that in the tea break, so you've got the additional information.
Can I just say something? I just think you need to be a wee bit careful thinking that too. I mean, the reason we have proposed in the annual plan to increase the business differential is so that way, from a fairness point of view, is that they won't be substantially worse off than they were in the past, right? So it's just putting the rates back to where you do what you're suggesting, Councillor Johansson. I just want everyone to be clear that all of a sudden, with the revaluation, those businesses will not only be keeping their rates where they were, they will be increasing them. So you will. So
I guess the flip side is the people in Bromley have got a big revaluation, so they've got a big rates increase percentage-wise. And so, but I just, rather than getting the information between 25 and 50 seems pretty small for the, it doesn't seem like it's worth having that amendment given just the difference in those two charts.
Are you removing your amendment, your foreshadowed amendment, Yanni?
Well, it'd be quite good to see, before I do that though, just what that business differential, what that would look like if that was possible.
So yeah, you only are asking, are you, to see the suburb graph?
Yeah, like the one that you've got that showed the 50 and the 25.
Yeah.
I'd just be interested in having that at what the proposed business differential was.
But you need to see,
2.25.
so you've got all the information, the impact on the businesses to doing that. So you would have to give you more information. I'm not saying we can't do it, but you've got to be able to consider both.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thanks.
So just for my clarity then, Councillor Johansson, is your foreshadowed amendment remaining on the table or?
No.
Well, yes, but depending on what that information says, because it seems like you're only talking about, even less than a percentage point difference between 25 and 50. I mean, it's almost negligible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we're coming down from 153 to 50.
So I'm happy to withdraw my 25 amendment to leave it with the 50, but I would like to get that just a little bit more.
So we'll withdraw your amendment, but
Thank you.
the information, if we're able to supply it through the break, we will do it if we can.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the second question
Thank
I
you.
had was in regards to the rates rebate. The threshold, as I understand, it's about $45,000 a year. So for people to qualify, I appreciate that that's a targeted thing to help people, but do we have any sense of the uptake of it in our city? Like either, who's eligible versus what the uptake is, but also it does seem in terms of median incomes that threshold is so low that a lot of people wouldn't qualify for it who might be facing.
We can definitely find some numbers on the uptake. It's best to look at last year because a lot of people leave it to the last minute to apply. So we could maybe look at how many did last year. In terms of the income threshold, it really very much depends on the number of dependents in the family and also what your rates actually are. I was doing a few, you can play around with that online rates rebate calculator and just, plug some numbers in. And it's pretty easy to get, the rebate still when you've got income of 60,000. If you've got dependents and if your rates are, quite high.
Okay.
So, you can play around with that and get a really good impression of the level of the income.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
Yeah, so just because I know how much my fellow councillors like to make informed decisions, do we have a graph of the range of UAGCs across New Zealand? Would be quite helpful to have of what's the lowest, what's the highest.
Yeah,
because are we going into territory where no one else is, or are most councils at $50?
So I guess there's a quick question. Would you be interested in the UAGC on its own or all fixed charges?
Well,
I think it's relevant in terms of you can't look at that in isolation. You need to understand what councils were doing with all their other rates as well.
We don't we don't have it for everyone, but we do have that for a few different metros. Just to reiterate advice I've given previously, we are very low. We are, as far as metro councils go, we are very intensive capital value-based rating system.
Right.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the other half of this question.
You mean the second question?
What's
The
that?
second question.
Yanni's already on 7.
No, he's
It's all right,
not.
some of his people choice colleagues are lending some. So Jake's now out. But
Moving
just
right
not
along, Aaron.
So the other one is, and Sarah did kind of raise it, would be to see a graph of home ownership across the city, because we could be doing this to only benefit a ton of landlords. So it'd be nice to see that suburb by suburb where the ownership rates are. Just because properties are low value, it might be a rental.
And the foreign ownership of those rentals as well.
I think we're getting into
we
territory.
won't be able to do that.
Righto, so are you all done? Thank you, Aaron.
So we don't
Andre.
do that.
We may, but not with the.
No, you're done? Right. So thank you very much. So that means that we've got a mover and a second. We've had all the discussion questions. So that is now moved forward to the next level after.
Now we move on to Amendment 4, because
Correct.
we're just doing whose amendment, who's the seconder, a very short view, not a get your debate in before you get to the questions of officers, and then move on to the next one,
Okay.
because you've got a few to get through.
I'd like to call Victoria Henstock to move your amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's as written in front of us that the amendment is to defer construction of the Wheels to Wings route, sections 1, 2 and 3 for a period of up to 12 months. And that's to allow staff and the local councils to work together with the affected communities on those previously identified design issues. So this is about achieving better alignment. And I've worked with staff on this, and you'll see on our spreadsheet that this one is supported. So I don't intend to go into it any further, and I'll be happy for council to talk to
Staff advice. Seconder is Councillor
Aaron, seconder. Yep. So staff advice, please.
Staff advice, sorry. This chair's very short.
I think it must be one I sat on.
It's me that's short. Good eye. Look, we have worked with Councillor Henstock on this, and it is not deferring the project. We are just not starting construction. The budgets that we had on program, that stayed on program last week with the CEF discussions, have stayed on. We are working through the design process and engaging. We're going to look, as staff, we are going to look to engage, and the local councillors are going to look to engage with us, with the community, to resolve the design issues that have been identified through the process. We've talked at the briefing about those design issues, and that we've got quite a long and extensive list of individual design issues. So that's how we're going to do that and work with it. But it isn't effectively changing the process that we were moving forward with, but we're working with the councillors to do that.
I think.
Okay, thank you. So Tyler?
So just to be clear, you're not deferring the construction. It's still as planned, but you're somewhat fast tracking the consultation with the community and alignment with the councillors.
We are going to. So normally when we go into a detailed design process, we get on with it, we deal with the community, but we don't necessarily engage with our local councillors or the local councillor in that point.
Yep.
We just get on and get it done. We've had the approval to get it done. So we're going to do that in a slightly different way and work with Councillor Henstock and Councillor Kewen to resolve those issues with the community members. So there's a lot of individual issues along the route that we're going to get resolved. But yes, the budgets as they were on did not allow for construction to start.
Okay, so there's no financial risk if we vote yes for this?
No.
Okay.
Pauline?
So it's a little bit confusing now. So last week when we agreed not to defer any of this, and now you're saying this is a deferral, but it's not a deferral. So would you be equally happy to carry on as we agreed last week when we talked about the CEF program? Would you be equally as happy to proceed in that manner as you would in this?
So we are proceeding in that manner. We're changing just the engagement with the local councillor.
So why is that an annual plan issue?
I think
Not a
that's the point.
budgetary
It was
impact.
not, it's supposed to be more a noting. Staff are saying that this won't change the budgets. The budget that was agreed last week, I think it's $1 million, isn't it, Lynette, this year, will still continue. So we're not changing that budget. Construction was not supposed to start this year, but all that Lynette is noting is that following the conversations and the concerns raised by the local councillors, that they will engage with them on it. Doesn't change anything. Am I correct, Lynette?
So this would be a noting provision, not a decision, and it's actually is not going to slow the project delivery date down at all, in your view?
No. One of the things that has come to light, so I should share this with the council today, it has come to light since our briefing and the work we've done with the SURF, is that with all of the changes with national funding, it is unlikely that in this year we would get approval for NZTA funding on this. However, it is more likely to come through in the next NLTF. So it doesn't change the process. We will still get that approval in. I know that's a big bomb. We have worked with NZTA on this. I don't expect them to decline it. However, they have very, what's the word I'm looking for? They've got very tight budgets now that are getting tighter and harder to meet with everything that's happened with Cyclone Gabrielle around the country.
Okay.
They have said it was always on a possible list, but they have verbally advised us that it's unlikely to get funding.
So the wording in this is not appropriate really when you're saying you weren't going to begin any construction anyway in this year. And I would assume, and in my past experience, staff have always worked with local councillors on the cycleways. So I don't understand.
But not usually through the detailed design process. Not at this level, through this process.
So I think if it's going to be a noting provision, we need to get the wording correct as well. If it wasn't going to start construction anyway, we're not deferring it. So I'd rather have that defer word taken out. Anyway, that's just my view. Thanks.
Victoria? Oh, sorry, Sam was... Oh, you go, Victoria, and then Sam.
I'd like to just have another chat about this construction issue because I asked you this very same question yesterday. And you said that there were some elements of construction that would have been planned in the next year. So I'm hearing something different again today. And I'd also like to just clarify then, so from the public's perception, the Waka Kotahi funding was already available for this project. So just clarifying what I'm hearing for the public, that at this moment it is not confirmed.
No.
So there's two issues there.
So all right. There was never significant construction planned to start next year. That budget wouldn't have allowed it. If we had moved forward, we would have been doing a bring back. So if we stick to the budgets we've got, we do the detailed design, we move forward with the local councillor, we keep moving forward, we keep the project moving forward as we agreed last week at the SURF discussion with the resources that we've got. That's my understanding of the conversation we had yesterday.
Okay.
The Waka Kotahi subsidy on significant improvement projects is applied for post. We put a business case in post council decision to move to construction. So we put an implementation business case in. We have always said along the way, it is expected to get it. We've explained the process before to council on a number of occasions that we apply for it. It has always been indicated on a possible list. We have always expected it to get support. We still do expect it to get support. It is where in the NLTF cycle that we get that support from it. Now, if I hadn't brought it up today, I would have had to report it to council at another time if we hadn't got it. So I knew it, so I brought it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that you said yesterday there wasn't significant construction, but the point was that you said there was some construction, even though it was not significant. So that's the point that I want to make, to clarify the questions that are being asked about construction, because you will be deferring it. You're not intending to do any construction, regardless of how significant.
No, for up to 12 months.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if it's a question for you, Lynette, or Russell, just around the funding then in terms of this. So at the moment, because you mentioned potentially a bring back, can someone just clarify, I'm just going back to what we had last week, how much for the next financial year is in the budget for Harewood Road, Wheels to Wings?
2.8.
2.8, okay.
For the three sections. It's approximately 2.8 for the
Right.
three sections.
And so am I right in saying now what we'd originally, and sort of following on a wee bit, and I get we may get it in a future year, but that 2.8 will be funded purely from council this year because we haven't got any funding?
No, the way we work it with NZTA is the detailed design is covered through their implementation request. They still anticipate being no. We've got the pre-implementation sorted.
So
my
sorry,
understanding.
just so I'm clear, who's paying that 2.8? Is it NZTA?
It's a mix of NZTA and council. It's the construction that's not supported at this stage.
Right,
The implementation.
Okay, so design.
Yeah, and so just last one, just so I'm
Sorry.
really clear. So the construction isn't supported at the moment by NZTA through that fund. Not to say it won't be in future, but if we, to Pauline's point, if we're actually just carrying on as we were with construction in this year, that would be council funded, even though we have no surety over the NZTA funding.
If we did it, we wouldn't sign a contract until we had surety of that funding, or we would come back and talk to council before we signed that contract.
Okay, cool. So
So we wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I see where Vic's coming from now. That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Yanni.
Thank you. Are there any other projects that we're expecting to get funding from that we're not likely to get in this current round?
Oh, that's
that's too big for
yeah,
me to
that's
answer.
got nothing to do with this. So thanks very much. So
well, can I just check then in terms of this actual project? So, does this the NLTF? When is the next funding round that you think it's eligible for?
24-34. It's the same funding round as our LTP.
24-34. So
It's 24-27. Sorry.
27. So basically, I'm just trying to understand when we'd be in a position to know from NZTA.
And our next NLTP aligns with the NLTP period.
Okay.
So it's next year.
And if we'd known this when we did the surf things, would we have still made the same decision to keep this not being deferred and give the 7 million back to government?
We've not given any money back to government.
No, haven't given any. I'm sorry. I would not have changed my advice at the surf meeting if that's the case, because this is still a decision that has a hearings panel decision. The community still have an ability to rely on that decision. That's the advice we've had.
Okay, so
right. So this doesn't does this free up any resource?
No.
No. Okay.
We've done this to death, and we've got a mover and a seconder, so it moves across to the next phase. Thank you very much.
Amendment 5.
Amendment 5, which is
Excess water charge.
yes, excess water charge. Councillor MacDonald.
And can we have your seconder, please?
Me.
You.
I mean, we've probably done this one to death, and the staff have already been through the questions and answers. Just very simply, I fundamentally think we should be lifting the limit on this. I hear from people every day who have a severe, I guess, have had an allergic reaction to what we have done as the council in terms of this. I think we've already. I'm putting this
Sounds
up.
a bit debatey, this.
And
that's rich coming from me.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to stop, Mayor, if you don't want me to talk.
Carry on.
Yeah. No, look, the reality is we just wanted to lift the limit, make it a bit more consistent with under and over charges at the moment. I think the shared meter thing is still a big problem across the city. And yeah, I think 900 is a good compromise. My preference would have been to remove it altogether, but they tell me I can't, so we won't at this stage. So yeah, there's questions for staff if they want it.
Mm-hmm. Just got a mover and seconder. Are we happy for that to go to the next? Mark? Yeah, fine away. Oh, you're all good? Okay. Yep. So that means we're on to Amendment 6. Councillor Cotter.
Thank you, and Councillor McClellan's going to second it. Self-explanatory. It's just I think it's better to give people an option of whether to use $1 million or less of that, say $500,000 from the Capital Endowment Fund, because it will affect people being able to apply to use that fund next year. So would only leave, what was it, 500 and something in there. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just putting an option in this consultation document. And if that was passed, the rates increase would go from 5.58 to 5.66 if there were no other amendments agreed to. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any other questions Far away, Sam. Yeah.
Just in terms of what would we be consulting on in terms of the actual number we go out with? No, which one?
Options, the million that's suggested
Oh,
by
so we
staff,
actually go, okay.
or the 500, which would have a
Well, it's just
rate.
Yeah, okay. Haven't quite done that before.
Okay. So that one's jumped across the line. So we're now on to number 7. Here she comes. Celeste, far away, mate. Sorry, is the staff advice on the... Yeah, it got a mover and a seconder, and we had...
We're just saying that there's no advice that'll be matter for you to consider whether you want to go out with the 2 options or not.
So, yeah. Okay. Okay. So, amendment number 7, Celeste, please.
Yeah, so...
I'll second it, by the way.
Oh, yes, Phil's second it.
I'll third it.
Got a third here. Any fourths? Sorry. Got a fourth over here. Sorry. Today we've got an opportunity to get alongside a community-led project. For those that didn't see the front page of the press last week, this project has been community-led by a group that was allocated $2.5 million in funding through the Canterbury Earthquake Appeal Trust. And the concept of the project, which has been led by the community, is to spend $2.5 million of this grant, turning 1,000 square metres of largely vacant land behind Marine Parade Pierside building into a village green. So this effectively becomes a community hub where people can gather. And this village green, much like we've seen in other suburban areas, will become a place where we have music, we have busking and events, and it's going to be surrounded by bars, restaurants and shops. The key thing to note with this project is that we have an opportunity here to effectively provide some council support to make sure that we align the delivery of this community and private partnership alongside some council planning in terms of the public realm element.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks for your support.
Just question, was it 2.2 or 2.5? I thought...
The original grant was 2 million, and then the community leadership group received another 200, and then I believe they received another 300. And some of that, of course, is around GST and extra costs. So they want to make sure that they have the full.
So sorry, that extra 300 to get it up to 2.5 is not this 300, just to be clear to everyone.
No, that's separate.
No, that's right. No, that's fine. Thank you.
So can we have staff advice, please?
Bruce has got a little bit to start with.
Yeah, I'll just start off with the context. So you're aware from Councillor Donovan that there is private investment and commercial happening and some community investment. So we've been looking at this and looking to make sure that the work minimises disruption if we were to do it, and also potentially helps with public confidence. So there's some benefits in bringing this forward. We have worked with Councillor Donovan and more recently the Community Board and suggested that there needs to be some substitutions brought forward for this, given that we're bringing forward money that's already on budget, but there are resource constraints. So Lynette can probably talk more about what those resource constraints are, but those will be the big considerations that councillors will have to make if they're going to make this decision.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I apologise to Councillor Donovan. I haven't had a lot of knowledge of this project, and staff only talked with the community board about it last week. I think there's quite a bit more work to do to understand the resource implications. A $300,000 budget in next financial year is a very big consultant resource implication for us, and they are the very resources that we were talking about during the SURF program. So, and this project actually had 78,000 deferred next year as part of the SURF discussion. So I do think there's quite a bit more work to do to understand the resource implications and understand the ideal program that is going to happen. It is a concept that is out for public feedback. I understand that. At the moment, as staff, we don't understand what that means from a resource perspective in next financial year. So our staff advice is that there would need to be a substitution, and we haven't had one put forward. But I also think there's more work to be done in order to understand that properly. It may be that we only need 50 of that next year and the rest in the year after. I'm just saying we don't know. Okay. So I fully support staff and Councillor Donovan in working to align with this, but I don't think this is the right time to do the change. That's my advice.
Okay. Jake, did you have something to say?
Question?
A question, of course.
Okay, simple question then. If we were to bring this money forward, would it progress work any quicker? Like the transport program's full, would...
I don't know where I'd find the resource to do it if you brought the money forward.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so that one has crossed over the line. Yep. Thank you very much.
Amendment 8.
Amendment 8. Councillor Peters, would you like to move your amendment?
Yes, happy to move. This project is one that was scheduled in FY25.
Is your mic on?
Yep, mic's on. Scheduled on the long-term plan, FY25. Desire in the community is to try and bring this forward. This is a safety and massive congestion issue out in Hornby, and was due to be done before the earthquake, was put back because of the earthquake, and 12 years later the community are really keen to get this progressing. And Andre was offering to second this.
Who's
Andre?
The seconder?
Councillor Moore.
Oh, Andre, right. Andre, seconder. Sam, thank you. Okay, have we got any staff information, please? And then Aaron's got a question.
Again, it's a balancing act. It's in 25. To bring it forward, we would need something else to be released. I understand that that's not ideal. Just for reference, for all councillors, all intersections are ranked across the city for safety. There are higher intersections across the city that we are moving forward with. I understand that that's frustrating for some communities, but we really do need a substitution if we're going to change it.
Tyler?
Okay.
I'm a walking bowling ball. Just a quick question. What rank is that intersection based on the safety measures?
If you can't
Sorry,
answer
Lynette.
I can't answer it straight away. Somebody told me yesterday, but
I suggest you get that information in the tea break, because
I can get that and come back to you.
Voting on them until after.
Okay, cool. And the next question is around reporting. Do you have statistics on reported incidents in comparison to non-reported? I know it's a little bit tough to get that kind of data.
From a data sense, that actually tells you why we don't have that information. If it's not reported, we don't have it. However, we do. When we look at intersections and intersection, and look, I need to commit to doing a presentation to you all at council to explain how we develop a collective risk map across the city. But when we look at it, we look at a combination of the NZTA police database, the CAS database, and also we look through our own system to see where tickets have been raised or comments have been raised. We look to gather up as much information as we can on those to feed into that process. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, by non-reported, I didn't want to sound stupid. It was about reporting to the police, not reporting to council.
Yeah, it's all reported. All of the information we've got is what's reported through the police. So if it's reported to the police, it is logged in the database.
Okay.
So even if it's a non-injury accident, so there's injury, fatality and non-injury accidents. So even if it's a non-injury, if it's been reported to the police via an insurance system or something like that, then it's logged in the system.
I see.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Lynette.
Okay, thank you. And just one question from me, please, Lynette. So what you would prefer if this went ahead for X number of dollars, whatever it is, you'd like to see a reduction somewhere else in that ward or area to cover it, so to speak?
Not ward or area specific.
Yeah, we need to have somewhere else that we're not doing the work, because those resources need to go off the work that they're doing and onto this to do it, is really what the issue we've got is.
Yep, thank you. So that's across the line. So we're on to number 9, which Dawn's just going to...
Councillor Johansson, my advice to you is that this isn't an amendment, and that can you raise it as part of the debate so we can put it as a noting item, please? If you're happy to do that. I think officers had already asked you that.
Yeah, sure. I was just concerned that the staff advice suggested there wasn't there was more information required, but staff have actually already been tasked with providing a lot of information around this in an email response I've had from last year when we adopted it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy. But I don't want it delayed to the LTP. I want to actually consider it as part of the drafting.
So we will put it as a noting item, as part of the debate.
Okay. So that brings us up number 10, which is...
Sorry, can I just be clear? Will there be information that's been able to provide it in the consultation document around what we could consider?
You want to... Sorry, you'll have to be a little bit more specific, because all you're asking for is for a creation of a line item to implement the Boa Apahu Eco Guidance Plan.
Yeah, so if you take...
That's a detailed matter in terms of delivering some
There's
information
currently,
to
as I
you.
understand, no budget attached to this guidance plan. If you take the Mid-Heathcote linear plan, which is great, there's a line item that, it's a few $100,000 every year to do stuff. But when we adopted the plan, we asked staff to identify what could be done within existing budgets, and they were looking at different units around what work they were doing. So it was just to get some visibility of what's committed to this or not, so that the community can understand what we're doing. That's all. I mean, I'm happy if it's easier just to be a noting provision.
Yeah,
But
I'm happy for it to be a noting provision. What you're asking for, staff should be able to provide you with the factual information to say what is physically in the budget or not. So can you please ensure that that happens, whomever I need to be looking at through?
Also in the Three Waters area, you're right, Councillor, that you requested, the council resolution was to look within existing budgets over the next 12 months, but the pressure on Three Waters budgets for doing this sort of thing at the moment, there is just no way. That's why I've suggested it goes out to an LTP decision.
Don't know yet. I'll need to get there when we get there.
Okay.
You looked for existing budgets. We looked, honestly, there is no room at the moment.
I'm happy to move a substitution for the Hagley Oval. I think it's a $5 million
It's not
project.
within the same activity.
So.
Okay, so you
I'll have a conversation in the tea break. If there's anything specific I can wrangle out of my officers, I shall tell you.
Do you want me to recirculate the advice I had previously? Is that
If
helpful?
you could, please, that would be good.
So, Sarah, is this question on... It is related to that, yeah.
I was just going to say that while the Low Heathcote Guidance Plan, it's not just Three Waters, because it's broader than just the actual waterway boundaries, and so it's not just Three Waters budgets, it's parks and reserves and kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, thank you. So now we're on to amendment number 10, and Yanni, this is one of yours.
Pretty straightforward.
We're nearly
should,
there.
Should go through.
We're not much longer. Keep going. We'll have a break at the end.
Okay, so sorry, Yanni, I didn't hear. Did someone second it? Did I hear?
Oh, are you doing seconders for amendments now? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you're putting this amendment. Who's the seconder?
Who's your seconder?
Celeste, thank you.
So, I mean, all it is the money that we've taken off for the major cycleways getting put back on, with small reductions in the some of the Stadium Street budgets, and also the Ferry Road Active Transport Improvement budget. I've still not really had clarity over the Phillipstown Ferry Road Active Transport budget around the quantum that's being deferred. It doesn't align with the previous advice, so I'm struggling a little bit on that one. But yeah, so anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so is Jake would like to have some question?
Just one.
Yep.
So Lynette, similar kind of to the last one, you know, bearing in mind that dollars on a bit of paper are all well and good, but obviously it's, you know, people up on whatever floor it is you guys are based, I'm not sure which one, but that actually have to do, is it 4? Yeah. They have to do all the work. So if we move this money around for the streets outside the stadium, will either of these projects actually happen any sooner? I guess is the first one. No,
I don't
right.
believe they will.
So, okay, well that sort of negates my second question, which is what would the effect be on the stadium?
I
and
think
OpEx costs
the
of
shifting the
one?
money on the stadium has a bigger effect because
Right. So
not
what,
having the money on the stadium slows that down.
so can I just clarify? No, hold on. My question. Can I just clarify what you're saying? Is if we were to move this money, it probably wouldn't have any effect on the projects that are preferred to be swapped in, but it would have the effect of delaying the streetscapes around the stadium, which obviously would push a whole bunch of extra cost on the council.
It would definitely have an impact on the Te Kaha Streets project.
It's tiny amounts of money, like off those
That's
projects.
when you get to the debate, Councillor.
Can I just check with staff then? Like, my understanding is that council contracts in the delivery of the MCRs. So we set up a special panel of private providers to be contracted into council to do that work under the sort of Velos group. So is that group able to work on non-cycleway projects?
No, they're contracted to work on cycleway projects, but if we took them off and put them onto other projects, they couldn't do the cycleway projects. But they're also doing a number of cycleway projects at the moment, not particularly able.
Right. So what's the capacity for them just to do the design work on the Opawaho Heathcote River Road and the Otakaro Avon River Road? Given it's only 105k, doesn't seem like a big amount of budget to just get the designs done, given that we've got a team.
Designs are not going to be done for 105k, but it was the start of that. They are not progressing those at the present time. In the meeting last week deferred them for 1 year. It is not a big impact on the delivery of those programs. Those teams are working really hard on delivering Norwest Arc, Northern Line, South Express, all the other MCRs that we're working on at the moment as well. So we haven't got an unlimited resource even out in which is why we came to you last week and said we have a resourcing issue nationally. We don't have enough engineers and designers to do the work that we need to do.
Right. Okay, so that's number 10 all done, and that's across the line. Thank you, Yanni and Celeste. Now, number 11, is that?
That's changed, yes. So are you happy to have that as a noting provision, Councillor Donovan?
Yeah.
Okay, so number 11 is a noting one. Now we go back to number 1. And then we have a cup of tea here.
You're doing really well, members, by the way.
We are doing very well. So, number 1.
Number 1, we need to go back to amendment number 1.
Yeah, because Tyrone changed the wording.
So, no, just take it. I'm going to rescind that amended wording.
You've rescinded the...
Yeah, and we'll just talk to the wording that we've got here. I'm just a little bit confused because basically all I want is for the funding for the head-to-head walkway to remain as it originally was at 230k instead of 30k. If that amendment achieves that, then I'm happy with that.
Okay, Andrew?
Sure. So, much like what you've heard from other units...
Oh, sorry, can I just check? Have you got a seconder? Councillor Fields, thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So much like you've heard from other unit heads, it's really a deliverability matter. So there's been a reasonable amount of work over a number of years. For those that don't know this, the head-to-head walkway runs right around Whakarapo, the Littleton Harbour, from head to head, and it's been going for a number of years, and it's funded. There's a total of about 2.3 million of funding across what remains in the current long-term plan. in addition to the funding the question that's been raised this morning, there is another 400,000 for a part of the head-to-head walkway for a repair of the retaining wall between Allendale and Governor's Bay. So there is money being spent in the capital area on that walkway. There's a separate project, which is the one that's being referred to, where the staff advice is to rephase it until the next year, and that will allow staff to get on with additional planning, design, approvals and consenting. So if the money sits in this FY24, it's highly likely that we wouldn't be able to get to construction at this point. And so really what we're saying is rephasing the funding is rephasing it in line with deliverability. It's not going to impact the program. And we can bring back that funding if it speeds up. So that's essentially the staff advice, that this is a long-term program. The funding fluctuates from year to year, and we tap into the funding when we're ready to deliver.
So you mentioned 2 projects. Both of them have had the funding deferred, right? So the seawalls, I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. 30k, so you've 400k has been deferred on that. I am 100% comfortable with that. What I'm talking about is Project 408, funding for general maintenance and track building on the head-to-head walkway. So the original funding was 230k, and currently it's 30. It's been 30 proposed. It's only that 200k that I want to have reconfirmed. So the seawalls, let's just take that out of there. Don't conflate them or confuse the other councillors on that. Like it's just, yeah, good, okay, cool. So I just want to make sure that we're really clear on it, that it's the track building. Cool. Start.
I'm just making it clear to the councillors that there are more than one project that relates to the head-to-head delivery. There's more than one project in our capital program.
Yep. Okay, cool. And so the second, so next follow-up question, if I may. So you're talking about planning and consenting that needs to happen, that there isn't resource to do. Can you talk to me? So I just need some clarification.
Sorry, we're not saying there isn't resource to do. What we're saying is that is the next phase of work that needs to be done. That is resourced, but the funding that's required for the construction works is unlikely to be needed in FY24 for the next phase. If it does accelerate, we can bring it back from FY25. It won't impact the delivery of the program.
So my understanding is that there are sections of track. So for example, the section between Allendale and Teddington, sections out near Purdo, and another one that escapes me at the moment, that with some engagement with, for example, the Rod Donald Trust, we would be able to advance quite significantly if the funding was there, and it would not be dependent on staff's ability to plan. There's no consenting issues with private landowners, so it's kind of like there is, if the money is there, the will is there, the people are there, the resourcing's there, everything's there. We just need the money.
Staff are continuing with work on the head-to-head on the next phases. So what's in the current draft plan shifts 200,000 into the following year, and I guess what I've been trying to say is if we get to the point that we can construct more this financial year, we can still tap into that budget. Nothing's lost, is what I'm saying. It doesn't show up to the public, but I guess, we're working with the working party. There's a working party associated to this head-to-head. So, correct.
So then why not put it into the annual plan? The will's there
because the advice I've been given, and I can only go by that. The advice I've been given is we're not likely to need it in the next financial year.
The advice that I've got says that if the money is there, it can be
Sure.
it can
Unfortunately,
be spent into.
I don't have that advice. I've got my staff's advice. So, yeah.
I'm just wanted to check, like, do we need, like, I've had to provide substitutions. Does everyone need to do that as well? Like, do we need a substitution for this? The stadium streets? I mean, I support this amendment, but I just wondered if we do a substitution, will that enable us to proceed with the amendment and get the work done?
There's no substitution required.
Because
the impression I have from staff is that if they if the work can be done, or they find that they need it to be done, it can be done just by pulling money back. I'd pull it forward, but it's called back.
Yeah, I'd pull it forward as well. That's what Andrew has clearly stated.
Yeah. So that's everyone's got a mover and a seconder for everything. We've put some down as notings. So I'm suggesting we have a breather and come back at midday, and we will move into the debate and vote for all the amendments and resolution 2, and we will have 5 minutes each to do our debate if you require it. Thank you.
On the amendments and the resolution.